Super Bowl 55 is all set for this coming Sunday, and the idea the NFL would make it to the championship game without any kind of catastrophic disruption because of COVID-19 was not at all guaranteed. In fact, almost unthinkable when play kicked off in September. Yet without an abbreviated season like Major League Baseball or regional cities like the NHL or a bubble like the NBA had their first run at it, the NFL is headed towards a basically successful completion of their full season and championship in a sport in which, obviously, social distancing is impossible. A new piece in the Wall Street Journal explains that part of the reason for that success is because the league spent a whole lot of money to learn a whole bunch about how the virus is transmitted and how to stop it. One of the sports reporters on that story, Andrew Beaton of the Wall Street Journal, joins me now. Andrew, thanks for coming on. I learned a lot from your piece. Tell me first how the NFL and the NFL Players Association sort of approached the problem in getting their arms around it this season.
Well, if you think back to the start of the season, they weren't playing in a bubble. They were playing in America. And so they knew from the very start that they would not be able to stop people from getting infected with the virus. But their whole idea was, okay, if that's going to happen, let's stop it from spreading within teams. And they implored people to wear masks. They tried to enforce social distancing protocols. They instituted daily testing. But one of the interesting things they found out was not all of that was stopping transmission of the virus within teams. And when they started looking at the data, they started coming to some pretty interesting conclusions that applied to not just their football season, but you and me here and everybody at home.
Right. So they have these protocols in place, right? They're trying to maintain social distancing. And then you start having these outbreaks. There's the Baltimore Ravens had a huge outbreak. There are a bunch of teams that sort of ripped through the locker room. They start taking a look at the data, what is the data that they're looking at?
Well, the data they're looking at is kind of actually an unmatched type of data set. If you think about what the NFL was doing, there isn't really a business that had the combination of communities and resources to match it. These are 32 teams spread across the country with teams worth billions of dollars that are paying for testing every day for high-tech contact tracing devices.
Right.
That generates a lot of data. They conducted more than 900,000 tests over the course of the season. There's a lot of information in there. And when you combine that with the contact tracing, what they started to find was, we have been told from the start of the pandemic that we should measure our interactions with a stopwatch and a measuring stick, which is 15 minutes, 6 feet is the general guideline. But when they started looking at their cases, they were seeing that people were transmitting the virus in under 15 minutes, in over 6 feet. And so that was sort of a real clear moment for them that they could look at this and say, we need to change our protocols because the virus can spread like that. And if we don't account for that, we're going to have more of these outbreaks, and it could really upend our season.
And just reading from your reporting here, an investigation confirmed that cumulative brief interactions exceeding 50 minutes could lead to transmission. Didn't have to be 15 consecutive minutes, leading the CDC to change its definition of a close contact. So that this information, which they were only able to sort of derive because of the wealth of data, right? You said you got contact tracing devices on everyone, plus testing every day. So they could actually sort of go back and reverse engineer how transmission happened. And then they actually published this, right? They talked to the CDC about it.
Yeah, this NFL season quite literally became a CDC paper. This was published by the CDC. And what's interesting is if you go back to October, there was a paper published about a Vermont prison that talked about those cumulative interactions that added up to 15 minutes. It didn't just have to be one 15-minute interaction. It could be 3 interactions in 5 minutes. But what the NFL found was it doesn't even have to be 15 minutes. It could be under that. It doesn't even have to be 6 feet. It could be longer than 6 feet if you're in a poorly ventilated space. And so what it really adds up to is a more holistic understanding of this idea of transmission. It's not just time and distance. It's also ventilation. It's mask wearing, because it's very different if you have an encounter outdoors, say, wearing a mask for a long time than even a brief encounter inside a car with partial mask usage.
Right. So these contextual the contextual sort of differences, which we've been talking about again as we come up on year 2 of the pandemic, they actually just see popping out in their data, right? Because they're able to go back and they're seeing that poorly ventilated spaces, close contact without masks, they're seeing transmission underneath these 6 feet, 15-minute sort of benchmarks.
Yeah, exactly. You could look at a lot of these outbreaks that have happened in football, and they could be traced back to the simple idea of eating dinner together, right?
Right.
Transmission they actually found wasn't happening on the football field, which sounds kind of crazy given that everything we know about football involves really large people running into each other all day. But if you think about it, those interactions actually add up to very brief amount of times, and they tend to happen in really large, well-ventilated spaces like an outdoor stadium or just a very large dome. But when an outbreak could happen is, let's say, a couple teammates grab a sandwich together. And that data was really boosted by the fact not just that they were contact tracing, but they were doing genetic sequencing. So they could actually track the strains of the virus that were spreading and see that, okay, when two people tested positive, did they get it from each other or did they get it independently?
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.